Hey everybody, welcome to the Blendr Report, where news meets rational thinking. I am your host, Jonathan Harvey. This is your co-host, Liam DeBoer. Liam, what's up, dude?
Not too much, man. Today we're going to be going over some extreme political corruption with a company called GC Strategies getting $258 million from the Trudeau government without doing any work. The Canadian federal government also announcing that it will no longer fund municipal road projects. Nearly 75% of the Canadian Senate now being appointed by Trudeau, and the United States warning that Russia has developed space nukes. However, if before we get into things, you wouldn't mind giving us a kind rating on Spotify or subscribing to our YouTube channel wherever you're watching, that would be greatly appreciated. All right, let's get into things. All right, so first off, we've got a case of political corruption coming from the Trudeau regime. Who would have thought? A tiny consulting firm, GC Strategies, is operating from a West Ottawa bungalow and employing just a few staff, yet has been awarded approximately 140 contracts totaling nearly $258 million since 2015, with 46 of these contracts being awarded without competitive bidding. The total tally of contracts received has come under major scrutiny following the Auditor General's report on the ArriveCan scam since Monday. So what are your thoughts here?
Well, now I know how Trudeau became worth $85 million while he was in office.
No shit.
Dude, this is insane, right? A four-person team that runs a small consulting firm out of Ottawa gets $250 million in contracts, 40 of which there were no competition for whatsoever. If not, no, I think it was more than 40, like 47, I think, of which there were no competition for. So they were just handed the money. This is just blatant political. This is blatant corruption. I mean, what's worse, I don't know if you mentioned it, but what's worse is that this IT company doesn't do IT.
Yeah,
so
they even
none
stated
of them
that
are
themselves.
qualified to do any IT, and they admitted as much in a hearing in 2022. So what they do instead is they outsource it, and then they go, and then we just add like a tax on top for like 30%. We just pay ourselves. But it's funny when they mentioned how much they were taxing the government, they're saying, hey, we're paying each of us $1,000 to $1,500 a day, bro. That's not 30%. A top tier IT guy makes $650 a day. Like that doesn't track at all. So I mean, this whole thing is absolute nonsense. But what's interesting about it is it's so much money over so many incidences that is now going, it is definitely going to be reviewed. Like this is out in the open now. And it seems like whoever sort of the attorney general who put this information out, it seems she's got no room for this crap. And now that the conservative government's like, hey, we want to look into this, I don't see how we get into this whole thing, uncover everything from all 140 contracts they've had, and this doesn't blow Trudeau out of the water. Like I don't, if this is not the beginning of the end for Trudeau, I don't know that there is anything that will get him there.
But apparently Jagmeet was talking about how he wants to get all of the NDP MPs ready for a potential election. So I'm wondering, with both him saying prior about the whole pharmacare bill, if they don't pass something, because he did actually say pass if they don't pass a bill by March 1st. I went back and looked at that. And then with that, and then plus now these scandals that are seemingly impossible to get away from, or, I mean, I look at it and go, maybe that is Jagmeet starting to say, you know, I think this ship is starting to sink and we need to get our own lifeboat because...
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's always the chance. Like I figured there was 0% that they would not pass some sort of pharmacare bill in time to maintain this coalition. And I actually still think they're going to pass it. I still think that's going to happen because Trudeau's shown us that the man can stick and move. He's Teflon Don. He knows how to get himself out of these situations. And the reality is, with how our system works, he may be able to tie this stuff up long enough and drag it out long enough. And okay, you can look into this, but you don't get to look into everything else. And they're like, oh, well, we'll look into this one thing and not that. You know, there may be a way to sort of parse this out in Trudeau's, like from thinking from like a battleground perspective. You know what I mean? Trudeau's going, okay, I'm backed up against the wall here. What am I going to do? Well, first thing, I got to pass the Pharmacare Act so that I can maintain my coalition. He needs that, right? So I still think that happens. I do. And then in terms of the exposure of GC Strategies, I mean, they must have known this was coming, right? Because now that they were looking into the ArriveCan, so like back into this, I go, okay, Trudeau, in my opinion, he's not an idiot. If we're now just we're just getting this uncovered now, right? We're just saying, okay, GC Strategies, $258 million over 8 years. So when you're funding a company like that without making them put in no competitive bids, rather, a very small company in Ottawa, this becomes one of those things that you're like, hey, this could come back to bite us in the ass. And he got away with it for the last 8 years, but now that time has come. And ever since they started looking into the ArriveCan app in November, they stopped paying any money to GC Strategies. So in my opinion, Trudeau and the Liberals have known at least since that point, since November, okay, these guys are under some heat now. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to manage this? And they're not just sitting there waiting to be, to get crushed by this. They've got some sort of plan in place. They must have known that this AG report was going to come out and look damning, right? So how do they navigate through this? I think he will find a way. I think he will parse out the contracts and the information and put it on I think a lot of this is on this other minister right now, right? Who was working with the CBSA.
Well, that's a classic way that he gets out of it. Every time that he does something wrong, he just gets somebody in his cabinet to take the fall.
I think half of the contracts were handed out through this one minister under the CBSA. So he had this separation, right? And I imagine Trudeau probably didn't award any contracts. In fact, one of the things I remember from the ArriveCan report was that they couldn't identify who actually approved the GC Strategies quote. They're like, oh, we don't have no one actually approved it, right? So there's no one to point the finger at, right? And so it's my opinion that they're going to find their way through this, and they're going to basically, Pharmacare Act's going to pass. They're going to parse out the things that they're looking into, the cases or the contracts that they're looking into over a long enough period of time, because anything with the government is just obviously bureaucratic nonsense, that they'll be able to manipulate this and maneuver it so that it makes sense for them. And then in terms of who's going to take the fall, that minister might end up taking a fall, and maybe the people that own GC Strategies, some of them might be in a little bit of trouble, but if they can show in any way that they executed work, I mean, they didn't for the ArriveCan app, I don't know. But if they can, you know what? The country might just be out $250 million from corruption.
Have you looked into GC Strategies much? Did you do any digging on them?
Not really. Just kind of what I was reading in those reports. Like I know I caught the two names of the directors or the people that run the company, and I know they're saying it's up to 4 employees, but nothing major. I didn't really see much.
Because it doesn't seem like they're probably a legitimate business from everything that I've heard spoken on from this topic so far. But then the question goes, okay, is this a shell company that is set up to slush funds back to say, Trudeau and his cronies? Or is it, say, a shell company for powerful individuals that Trudeau essentially bribes or pays off?
I think in either case, it's one or the other. Yeah. And I think in either case, they're going to win.
Yeah.
They're going to find a way to maneuver this or manipulate it so that they don't get caught up here. That's what's going to happen. I mean, I imagine the people that run the company were like, hey, look, who are two idiot friends we have that don't have any money? Great. You guys are in charge of this company. You want to get rich? No problem. But here's the potential downfall. And I think you just put people in that line of fire.
Yeah.
Because if they took $19 million for ArriveCan and did zero work, I imagine that's the tip of the iceberg, because it's when you're getting away with something like that, people become more emboldened over time, right? Well, they'll charge more and do less work. At first, it's like, 10% over the top, whatever, see if we can get away with this kind of thing. And I think over time, it's like, 20 million, we're not doing any work. That's where they get. So I imagine if you start backing into these contracts over the last 8 years, the last 2 or 3 years are probably very damning. You know what I mean? So someone's got to take a fall. It's probably going to be these guys.
Yeah, it seems like the playbook for Trudeau anytime something like this happens where it is a scandal large enough that it should make the House of Cards fall, he usually just he does two things.
Hot potato.
He tosses another scandal out there,
yeah,
and then but more of like a nonsense scandal, but he makes sure that he's making headlines for something other than the actual important topic, and then also throwing somebody under the bus. Like, I mean, we just saw with him and the Speaker of the House.
Yeah,
him
exactly.
Getting rid of him for supposedly inviting the Nazi into Parliament, but then it comes out that, Trudeau gave that invitation himself and yet won't hold himself to the exact same standard.
Yeah, I just think, look, if Trudeau was willing to throw the Speaker of the House under the bus for a Nazi, and now we're looking at this going, he's moved $250 million. He's got a plan in place. He just does. There's no way, and he knows the system, and he's continued to manipulate it. He's gonna find a way through this. I just hope Canadians are like, fuck this guy. Like, never ever allow this guy to be voted in again. Like, if that's the best we can do, then that's the best we can do. But that's got to happen.
And I think a point here too to make is that because a lot of, say, Liberals we've seen in recent polling, they support the Liberal parties solely because they don't want to see a Conservative government formed. But okay, if you are so scared of the who's going to be put in charge of the government that you all of a sudden think there's a boogeyman that if they get into office, everything in the entire country could go to shit, which is possible. I mean, we're seeing it with Trudeau right now.
Yeah.
But if that is your concern, the true problem is that the government has enough power to be wielded incorrectly or with malice. And so if you're scared of a specific candidate, then the true answer is to start pushing for the government to have less authority, because then no matter who gets in, you don't have to be as scared of it.
Trying to convert some libertarians. Nice.
I am. I'm trying. Oh, we'll go further than libertarians. Give it time. All right, moving on here to the number 2 story. So the Canadian government will stop investing in new roads in the name of climate change. The federal environment minister, Stephen Guilbeault, said that Ottawa will cease investing in new roads and highways, stating that the existing network is deemed perfectly adequate. The Liberal government's decision aims to prioritize investment into public transit, active transit like walking and biking, and territorial planning. Guilbeault emphasizes redirecting funds from road expansions to projects combating climate change and adapting to its impacts. So, speaking of libertarianism, one of the main arguments for the government existence is for the building of critical infrastructure. So if the government is saying that is no longer a priority of theirs, are they just rendering themselves completely useless at this point?
Yeah, I mean, Guilbeault is a bit of a nutbag. You know what I mean? He's the climate zealot of climate zealots. I think he's been arrested for stuff like this in the past. Like this is he loves this. This is his space. I think he's bike riding in January to prove a point, or February, whatever month it is. Here's the problem. It just lacks practicality, and it's not what's good for Canadians. And I don't mean like, hey, we shouldn't minimize spending here and there to try to help climate change, whatever. But critical infrastructure. So we're having massive population growth, right? So how do you continue to expand your population if you're not going to spend any money on improving your infrastructure and new roads and highways? I mean, you drive through Toronto already, where I think we're one of the top 3 worst cities in the world for commute times. And we're pouring people in here, hand over fist. There's so many people coming in, and they said 2024 is going to be another record year. That's kind of their estimate. So how does this practically apply? And this is what I get from sort of the Liberal government. Even more like, it seems that the longer they're in power, the less in touch with reality they become. You know, so they have these ideas, we're not going to spend money on roads anymore. It's like, are we in Back to the Future? Like 2, where we're going, we don't need roads. Like, no, we do, bro. Like, this doesn't make any sense. And the other thing that I thought was interesting is it goes against what was he talking about the other day? Going green and all these electrical vehicles. So we have to go completely electric by 2035, but we're not even going to pay for roads because we want to limit private vehicle use. Like, what do you mean? Like, these are sort of contradicting ideas. And it just seems like every time this guy opens his mouth, he just continues to discredit himself. And the nice thing is, at least the provincial, like the premiers are pushing back. Ford, Ford's
a donkey.
Ford's a donkey. I mean, I don't have a lot of love for the guy, but at least he pushed back and he's like, this does not, like, in his same, like, not with anything overly intelligent other than just saying, hey, this doesn't make any sense. And, Scott Moe, who I apparently continue to think is from Manitoba, who is from Saskatchewan, same thing, he's just kind of like, hey guys, this doesn't make any sense. We need this infrastructure. We're pushing back. And the idea, what I'm saying here is premiers across the country were like, this does not track. And I understand a lot of the power to build these roads come from your provincial government anyway. So there's going to be kind of this push and pull here to sort of navigate this or figure this out. But it's good that you're seeing, kind of like you see with governors in the States and they push back against the president. At least you're seeing our premiers be like, hey, look, this does not make any sense. This might be some lofty idea you have, but this does not track. This is not what Canadians need. So hopefully the sound of reason kind of wins on this one.
I'd like to point out that this is part of the Agenda 2030 plan that I consistently ramble on about. This is the starting of the development of 15-minute cities, as they call them, or now they're also starting to call them complete communities. I think because the term 15-minute cities has started getting enough negative attention. But so this is from the Liberals' website discussing their Housing Accelerator Fund. Direct quotes, they say, They want to support municipalities that increase densification, establish inclusionary zoning bylaws, whatever the hell that means, and encourage public transit-oriented development. Their priorities are development of, quote-unquote, complete communities, prioritizing inclusivity, equity, and diversity, along with low carbon and climate resiliency. By complete communities, they state that this means they are walkable, consisting of appropriate residential density and access to a wide variety of amenities and services through public and active transportation. The Wikipedia definition of a complete community is one where automobiles are no longer used in favor of walking. This is also in line with the C40 City Initiative, with participating members already including Canadian cities such as Toronto, Montreal, and Edmonton, alongside international cities such as Paris, London, Milan, Beijing, and New York City. So some of the goals for the C40 initiatives, and again, these cities have already signed on to this, and this is part of that Agenda 2030. So they state two categories: progressive goals and ambitious goals. So their progressive goal in these C40 cities, or smart cities, or 15-minute cities, or complete communities, whatever label they toss at them, their goal is a progressive goal of having 1 in 5 people own a vehicle, and an ambitious target of 0 private vehicles. A progressive goal of 16 kilograms of meat consumption per person annually, and an ambitious goal of 0 meat consumption. A progressive goal of 90 kilograms of dairy per year, and an ambitious target of 0 dairy consumption. A progressive goal of 8 new items of clothing per person per year, and an ambitious target of 3 new clothing items per year. These are all in their own documents. This is not speculation. This is what they outline in the C40 initiatives. So when you think of 15-minute cities, what you really need to be thinking of is Hunger Games-esque districts, where we're already seeing this put into place in cities like Oxfordshire in the UK, where they started blocking off certain laneways for no car access on these roads. They put up big, essentially planter boxes in the middle of the roads that cars can't get around. And then they also started establishing certain rules and fines that you have to register your private vehicle with the government, and you have a certain amount of passes per year. I believe it's been a while since I've looked into this specific case, but I believe the number was you could leave your district 100 times per year, and after that, you would start facing fines. You would essentially get climate fines for this. And how they're trying to do all of this is through those CCTV cameras that will track your license plate and all of this. And if you're seen leaving your quote-unquote district or your 15-minute city too many times, you'll start getting essentially traffic infractions or tickets like you would for anything else. Like, this is insane shit. And I don't think people understand the level of just pure hatred that these people have to have for humanity and individuals to enact any sort of policies even coming close to this.
First of all, that is insane.
Yeah.
That is insane. It's crazy to me that they write this stuff out. Why do they keep saying the quiet part out loud? What are you doing?
But then they call you insane if you read their things.
Yeah, like, nah, guys.
They're like, here's what we're going to do.
Misinformation, bro. Yeah. What? I wonder how many of these people feel like they're doing the right thing, because and here's what I mean. Like, not the people at the top. The people at the top are nefarious and insane, but all the people that are kind of executing the mission, you know what I mean? Like, you're convinced, because there's no way that these people are all a part of the same, the same conspiracy or the same program. It's challenging for me to watch, because 95 or 99% of the people involved in pushing their agenda actually believe it's the right thing. And I just think that's where we need to focus on trying to we talked about converting people earlier. That's where I think we need to focus our energy, because what is the logic behind any of this? How does any of this make any sense to people who, like, in their right mind looks at this and goes, yeah, that's what we need to do. That's the answer. I don't think it's very many people. And I think it's a matter of how do you open people's eyes to where they are taking us, because without compliance, they can't get us there.
I would even go further and say that the people that are implementing this agenda and crafting it probably think themselves to be doing good anyways. I mean, Hitler thought he was saving the world. So
Yeah,
like,
he was also cracked out and some shit. So I don't know about him. I don't know if he's the best example.
have you looked at any of these people recently? They seem to be
Chrystia Freeland's on some shit for sure.
Whether it be Stalin, whether it be Lenin, Mao, any of these people that have tried to radically change society and greatly limit humanity through central planning, all of them thought they were doing the right thing.
Yeah. I mean,
so it's that old idea of Mark Twain, right? The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
But I just think, I don't care if you think you're good at this point. You're unabashedly evil. Like,
well, I think the challenge you have is this, right? Like, you are looking at this as a good versus evil thing, and I think that's where it becomes very challenging, because when someone doesn't feel like they're being evil and you think they are, then they think you are evil, right? So I think the understanding we may have to have about this is you have to beat them with better ideas, not by thinking of them as some evil enemy, especially if they think they're doing the right thing. Because you don't convert people when you bring, weapons to the conversation. It just doesn't happen that way. They just get more steadfast in their resolve and think you're an asshole, which you and I both come by honestly sometimes. but I think, this is interesting. Like, I'm just sort of uncovering this as we're having this conversation, but it's like, if all these people think they're doing the right thing, you really can't approach them with that sort of demeanor. You have to sort of be like, okay, well, you almost have to get them to cave in on their own argument. Sure. I think you do this by asking questions a lot of times and just knowing how to kind of corner people and be like, okay, well, what's this mean? And how does this work? And this and this and this. And then they can sort of, introspectively come to the realization that this is not the best solution. That's actually how I think most of this has to work. Otherwise, you're just going to have two fighting factions over what they think are two good ideas, right?
For sure. And don't get me wrong, the way that I talk to, say, you or my friends or on social media is completely different than when I get somebody like this in front of me.
For sure.
Because nobody can get mad at questions. And, well, some.
They shouldn't.
They shouldn't.
Not if you're having a rational conversation.
Yes. They might get frustrated, but they can't get angry, because then they show that they're not the ones acting with good intent there, because
Right.
I'm not scared of anyone asking me any questions on my beliefs. But I can actually make the moral, like, you said how it's a case of good versus evil. I can actually make a moral case for this, because a lot of people fall into the trap of, say, moral subjectivism, thinking that good and bad is completely relative to whoever's looking at it. Objective morality is rooted in whatever allows for the greatest amount of human flourishing. So if you look throughout human history, everything which has ever led to human flourishing has been granting individuals the freedom in order to pursue their own needs and wants. Some people will say, okay, well, we need to get authoritarian because there's this threat out there, right, in the outside world. So we need to do away with our individual freedoms in order to deal with that threat, whether it be, say, a adversarial military or whatever. Look at the largest and most powerful military in human history, which is the American military. That all came out of liberty, because what ends up happening is, because individuals, and essentially great individuals, humanity is typically pushed forward by a few small individuals. And in a centralized, planned world like they're trying to enact right now through Agenda 2030, it's just central planning at the end of the day, it doesn't allow for those individuals that change the world, whether it be the Albert Einsteins or the Elon Musks, whatever it be. It doesn't allow those people to carry out their own ambitions, which end up helping all of humanity. So I think it's very easy to make the case that liberty in and of itself is one of the ultimate goods of
Right.
the
Okay.
world.
So you said that. What is your metric for good was human flourishing.
Individual.
So the challenge you may have, though, is you're saying, hey, what makes this your case is human flourishing and liberty. But people on the other side could easily say, if we don't make these changes now, and the environment, climate change, comes to this precipice where we're all living in, I don't know, some ice age or some living hell, well, then how much human flourishing do we have? How much independence do we have? The earth comes to an end. That's what this is. So I think that's a big part of their argument. The
Sure.
big part of their argument is, well, if we don't make these sacrifices, there will be no human flourishing, right? Which is faulty because it's all based on bad science. Which I you know, but I think if you're kind of living in the space of saying, hey, these people think they're doing good, and then using your metric of human flourishing, again, I can see where these people exist on that side. I totally disagree with them, but I can understand where a lot of them are coming from.
Oh yeah, I can understand where they're coming from as well. I would just say in that scenario that, again, the giving the greatest amount of liberty to individuals in order to solve that problem will, because look, no great problem has ever been solved through central planning, whether it be economics, whether it be healthcare, whether it be education. None of these things have ever excelled in the public domain.
Right. I think then you get into a bit of an ideological conversation, though, on the efficacy, like now how efficient our government is, which if you ask a liberal right now, they think everything's fine. Like, and a lot of them do, right? All I'm doing is I'm just
No, I appreciate the devil's advocate.
yeah, that's
Don't
all.
worry.
I'm sitting on this side going, hey, and you know why I'm doing it? It's not really about your ability to have a conversation with people. It's about people that are listening going, this is insane. This needs to stop. We need to get in front of this. And then kind of arming them with the right tools to have those conversations, to understand where other people are coming from. Because if enough people are listening to this and then just take action to be like, hey, here's what I'm going to do to affect change. If they don't understand this side of the argument, they're not going to affect change. They're just going to make enemies. And that's all I'm trying to do. I'm trying to stop this from being about division and more about like, hey, how do we actually convert the people that think they're doing the right thing because they're leading us down the wrong path, right? That's all.
How we carry ourselves on social media might be different. I think you and I both would carry ourselves very differently in a personal conversation with somebody. It's very easy to get angry about these things or these people, and then anytime you see these ideas being held by other individuals in society, it's very easy to throw that anger at them. Sure. At the end of the day, it's one of those things where, okay, keep a calm and collected head, and then just try to change as many individuals' minds as possible. But you have to be welcoming in that conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I think the challenge you have today is that everything is so divided, and everything is sound bites, and everything is, you know, comments on Instagram. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of that's sort of the space people operate within. And then a lot of it is just about scoring points, and often partisan points. And the reason I'm bringing this up, or kind of be like sort of really kind of reiterating this, is those are the spaces that most people live within, except we're going down this path right now that is getting so bad that we actually have to stop being divided and start finding a way to communicate with one another that is going to be effective at changing people's minds, because now we're not going to have any more roads. Like, you know, obviously we are. I'm being facetious, but the reality is, you know, when you've got the environmental minister of Canada saying we're not investing any more money in roads, this is becoming a very real problem. We're crossing these lines. It feels like almost daily now, where we get closer and closer to, I don't even know what I would call it, some dystopian future that I don't even want to.
Tyrannical collectivism.
Yeah, like I don't even. Yeah, so yeah, your made up term that I really like, actually. You know what I mean? And I guess I'm kind of hitting this point today. I don't know. I didn't like wake up on the other side of the bed or anything, but I'm just kind of having this understanding of, it's like, hey, this is actually getting so bad that we just need to find a way to rally everybody to understand what's going on here and not really be divided and fight about it. We need to be able to convince people like, hey, this is going to affect the future of you, your family, humanity in such a negative way. Here's why. But I mean, maybe I'm just being idealistic myself.
I don't think we can change anything in the mechanisms of social media. I think that's how it's always going to be, like you're talking about with sound bites. I look at it and go, if I'm going to try to make my point on something of this nature, which is so hard to do already in, say, 60 to 90 seconds, to also give massive credence to the other side, or to say, and here's why I understand why people that don't think this way might think this way, it's just not possible. So, I mean, when I first started doing this stuff, I was largely trying to do that. And then I realized I was just saying nothing because I was trying to over-contextualize everything. But I think that does come down to the true goal should be able to get information into the hands of many individuals that can affect change around them. But then, yes, to your point, I think it is also important that those individuals know the proper way to go about that, which is, yeah, a very welcoming tone. Anyways, let's move on here to nearly 75% of the Canadian Senate being appointed by Justin Trudeau. So the Prime Minister has announced that the appointment of Manuel Odar, a lawyer with extensive experience in public service and advocating for workplace equity, health, and safety, to the Senate of Canada. Odar's appointment comes from the Independent Advisory Board to the Prime Minister, a system that was implemented by Trudeau upon assuming office. She is the 81st individual chosen by Trudeau through this system. In fact, nearly 3/4 of current senators were appointed during this period, and all of them are members of independent groups rather than political parties. One thing that you mentioned in the newsletter was how individuals should go and do background checks on some of these senators. What will they find?
So, first thing I want to point out is the Independent Advisory Board. It's why this is a bit of a farce is because the independent advisories, if you go look them up, it's a long list of liberals. And how they got appointed was by Trudeau. And admittedly, in the government website, Trudeau tells this governor and council who to select and put on the advisory board. So Trudeau built this nonpartisan third-party advisory board to help him select who's on the Senate. But he stacked the advisory board with a bunch of liberals who he chose. So first of all, the system's, it's already flawed. Now, the reason that this is a little frustrating, or why Canadians are led to believe these are nonpartisan senators, is because when Trudeau got into power, he basically said, "Hey, we got to shake this up. We don't want any more. We want a nonpartisan Senate, because there's too much of this back and forth. You end up stacking it with your side. We do this like that, whatever." So he kind of made people believe these are all going to be nonpartisan individuals. But all that did was it stopped the conservatives from trying to stack their people into the Senate, because all he's done since then is just stack liberals in. And then to your point, to your question rather. So if you look back at some of the people, some of the recent ones, you're going to find the guy who was the head of his campaign in 2014, 2015. He's been appointed. He was one of the recent ones. You're going to find a long list of like retired liberal politicians. Say, oh, they're nonpartisan. No, they're not. They're liberals. You'll find people that were like heavy campaign funders of the liberals for decades that are a part of this. And then also a lot of people that are in this equity and I don't know, like the DEI cult, a lot of the people from that space that have received tens of millions of dollars in government subsidies and grants from the liberals. So in one way or another, every single person that he's appointed to the Senate is tied to the liberals, whether they gave them money or whether they received money from them or whether they were a part of the party. And they're all being appointed by a system that Trudeau created. And he's just telling Canadians, hey, it's nonpartisan and I've got nothing to do with it. It's just such a dog and pony show. God, it pisses me off.
Yeah, it's crazy. And even one of the advisors chosen by Trudeau was what's his name, Huguette Lebel, who spent time working in government under Pierre Trudeau.
Yeah.
So
she was a lifelong liberal, and then she worked, I was just like, I looked it up, I'm like, this is insane. Yeah. And she's the board chair. I'm like, come on. Yeah. Okay.
I actually hate calling these people liberals because they're anti-liberal. I hate that they wear this name because, I think even a lot of, say, people in the conservative circles will talk about how liberals are evil or liberals are dumb or whatever it be. They'll toss some derogatory name at them. But liberalism is defined as, quote, political doctrine that takes protecting and enhancing the freedom of the individual to be the central problem of politics. Liberals typically believe that government is necessary to protect individuals from being harmed by others, but they also recognize that government itself can pose a threat to liberty. These are anti-liberals. They think the government should be in charge of everything, that they want to do away with individual rights such as freedom of speech and freedom of thought by censoring information. You can't have freedom of thought if you don't have the relevant information in order to build your thoughts. And then also, like we just talked about, when it comes to central planning and all of this kind of stuff, they're completely collectivists, top to bottom. They're anti-liberal. So to me, it's crazy that they get to wear the badge of liberal. But
yeah, I mean, it's kind of disappointing because it does sound better than conservative. It does sound cooler, but we don't get to have that label. Same with Democrats. That sounds cool, except we don't get to own that one anymore. It's interesting because they really were that. That's what they identified themselves as such because that's what they represented at one time or another. And now it's just kind of gone the complete opposite way. But like I say, like it's this kind of Ouroboros thing. Like it ends up eating its own tail. The cyclical nature of politics are they eventually become the devil. That's what they do to maintain power. But one of the things I want to highlight here, why I think it's such an issue that Trudeau was as appointed now. I think 77% of the Senate is because he's got a pseudo coalition. So now he's got a majority government in the House, and now he's got basically complete control of the Senate through who he's appointed. So when people look at that, they go, well, what does that mean? Well, that means that Justin Trudeau is completely in charge of everything that's happening in this country, essentially, at the federal level. That's what that looks like. That's why this is so dangerous. That's why I wanted to highlight it. And that's why I don't know what Poilievre's going to do when he gets in to sort of flip this around. But I think it's going to be a long time of just appointing new people before this kind of irons itself out. So this is actually an interesting liberal stopgap measure that's going to be a pain in the ass for the next 10 years.
Yeah. And it's crazy too. Again, it goes to that point of people wanting to, they don't actually typically want to shrink government. They just want their preferred people in control of government, because you see it, people down in America will complain about how Trump was trying to stack the Supreme Court and then turn around and not bat an eye twice at Trudeau doing the same thing with the Senate. And to me, it's just, again, it just goes to that kind of hypocrisy of saying that this is a bad thing to do if conservatives do it, but then when liberals do it, everything is hunky-dory.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Why did I just say hunky-dory?
I don't know. You did though. I wonder though if that's just their manipulation over the system or the media or whatever that looks like, because it's weird, man. Like, we live in this time now where, for the most part, conservatives are trying to correct course in Canada. That's the idea. That's what's happening. Except everything they do, it gets labeled as the problem and anti-democratic. And the liberals, who are actually causing all the trouble, are labeled as the saviors doing the right thing for humanity. It's so weird that we're living in this space where it's such a charade, and it's just weird because it's even culturally, right? It's not just in the media. It's not just politically. It's culturally, which I don't understand. Like, why are there so many idiots in the world?
I saw a clip the other day of a girl describing it, and she put it into good terms of how there's 1% of the world that is trying to direct it and controls it. There's 4% of the world who are essentially their soldiers. There's 90% of the world is just NPCs, zombies, however you want to describe them, essentially the idiots. And then 5% are trying to wake up or inform the 90%. And then those 4% are trying to stop the 5% from doing so. And it kind of becomes this battleground for essentially the minds of the mob.
Yes.
And I recently found out you've never watched Harry Potter, which is shocking. Have you ever seen Star Wars?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Well, of course. Don't you reach one? Do you remember this speech? I'm
too old for Harry Potter, dude.
No, you're not. Nobody's too old for Harry Potter. Before I started trying to take things in a little bit more of a serious manner, I used to call him Chancellor Palpagustine.
Nice.
But
it is with great reluctance that I have agreed to this calling. I love democracy. I love the Republic. The power you give me, I will lay down when this crisis has abated. And as my first act with this new authority, I will create a grand army of the Republic to counter the increasing threats of the separatists.
Like that's our
creepy.
government.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
That's exactly their mentality.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I love democracy. Don't question our democracy. Give us all.
Just give me more power to fix it. Like, okay, man, are you sure?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's the same thing that's happening here. And, I do want to qualify calling everybody idiots. Only the people that are falling victim to not understanding what's actually happening here and refusing to face the fact that, hey, unfortunately, the liberals are the ones causing all the trouble here, and that are just unwilling to sort of do any of their own research, even though apparently that's the wrong thing to do these days, and to be able to identify really what's going on and, how we can try to correct course as a country, as a nation.
And also to use their own language here. It's like, have compassion for the ignorant. I've been ignorant many times in my life. Hell, I voted for Trudeau in Jagmeet I voted for Jagmeet in 2019. Like, I was ignorant. I was an idiot. So
you voted for Jagmeet in 2019?
Yeah. I didn't know who to vote for. I was literally an
fair
idiot.
enough. Yeah, no.
I didn't pay attention to
No, it's all
anything.
good. It's all good.
I
I gotta go.
Yeah, totally. But it's one of those things where it's like, again, actually, and this is something that I came to terms with where I vote, because my home address is still back in my hometown. It's been conservative for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my vote and my riding is
Yeah.
more or less meaningless.
Yep. Yeah. Same. From a small town up north is similar. It just kind of, it seems like a lot of the Liberal or Democrats, it's mainly populated cities.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, I think, where a lot of their programs, a lot of their traditional programs actually make sense in those areas. So I completely understand it. Now it's just a runaway train of shit. But yeah.
For sure. All right, let's move on here to the United States warning about Russian space nukes. So they have suggested that Russia is planning to launch nuclear weapons into space, posing a significant threat to global security. While the threat is considered serious, it is not deemed immediate. The potential deployment of nuclear weapons in orbit would violate the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, a fundamental agreement for space stability. The weapons, if placed in space, would be harder to track and could target Western satellites, impacting communication networks and military targeting systems. So is there a reason to be concerned about the prospect of Russian space nukes, or is this just another ploy to scare people into Western defense spending?
I think a couple things. So in general, I think the world should be concerned that we're about to have a new military space race. That's what's about to happen. And then, any other nation, these 8 or 9 nations that have nuclear weapons, like legitimately, like officially rather, I'm sure several of them will be thinking the same thing. Well, we have to have space nukes as well. So now you've got this pretty scary situation where you can't really track where these things are. Maybe they think they can, but I think it'll be challenging too. So you don't really ever know how vulnerable your position is. Based on where these weapons are situated. And yeah, like you said, they can sort of do these coordinated attacks on Western satellites. Now, there are so many satellites up there now. I don't know how they could target them all at once or that they could take down the entire infrastructure. I don't know. I'm a bit of a blind spot for me there. But my issue is this, that we continue to just push the envelope further and further and further. And, I was doing an article this week, the world is spending on military aid at $2.2 trillion. And my issue is like, this is what we're spending so much money on this that we could solve, world hunger, homelessness. We could end poverty. Everybody could have global medical care for the same amount of money that we're spending on military and on arming ourselves, just so we can sort of kill each other. And I just don't really understand why this is the path we just continue to go down and everyone just kind of accepts it. I mean, I guess maybe we don't have much choice. But sort of to your question, do I think a lot of this is just nonsense rhetoric to bolster the, military and from NATO in the West? Yeah, 100%. If they've got nukes up there, we're going to put them up there anyway. That's just what it is. So why don't you just business as usual? Why don't you just put them up there? But you're actually trying to elicit some sort of fear. And I don't know if you read it on this, but they were trying to keep this quiet. Oh, let's keep it quiet. We don't want to create chaos. Well, then how come I'm writing about it? It's because you guys specifically said, okay, let's release this, but let's pretend we didn't want to release it because we didn't want to create chaos, because that'll create more chaos. Guys, if it's happening, then you put your nukes up there. It is what it is. I think a lot of this is just, like you said, to sort of bolster military support so we can spend more of that money that we should be spending on, bettering humanity on nonsense weapons.
People thought Trump was a lunatic or idiotic for signaling that America should start bolstering a space division of their military. And now you start to see what has come over the last few years. Like even it was, I think it was 2021 or 2022 when China, it's 2021. China tested a nuclear capable hypersonic missile that circled the globe in low Earth orbit before heading towards its intended target, not allowing proper defense strategies to take place. And then, people were making fun of him, saying how he was this big quack for starting to try to talk about military in space. And so many people hated the messenger that they shot the message with it, which is Trump. Like, it's the same idea with, they hated Trump, so they didn't take him seriously when he was warning Germany that they can't be reliant on Russian natural gas. Now look what happened. Maybe the guy is insanely impulsive, and that's not something you want in a leader, but it seems like he had the right idea before a lot of these people.
I think there's a particular situation where I think he definitely had made a good point. I think you do lose a lot of value from the guy because of who he is, for sure. But I think you get that with like, that being said, I'm not a huge supporter of the guy either. I'm not sure how many crazy things he said that they should have ignored. You know what I mean? So I don't know how you necessarily balance those scales. My bigger issue, I guess, is not so much about who's right or wrong. It's just the fact that it's happening. It's just the fact that we're doing this. And to be quite honest with you, I have sort of this thought: nuclear weapons are inherently unstable, right? So how are these weapons going to perform? How well do they maintain when they're exposed to vastly different conditions in space? I don't know the answer to this, and maybe, hey, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. But there's no gravity. Everything's different up there. So I actually don't know, like,
temperatures, everything.
Yeah, I just don't know how risky it is when they're like, hey, we're just gonna have nuclear arms up there too. Like, what's gonna happen to them? Are they gonna be duds? Are they gonna blow up? Like, what are the potential ramifications of this? I don't know. It's kind of a weird thought. It just kind of came to mind because I was like, hey, this seems dangerous.
So since 1950, there have been 32 nuclear weapon accidents known as broken arrows that result in the accidental launching, firing, detonating, theft, or loss of a weapon. 6 nuclear weapons have been lost and never recovered. They just don't know what's going on with them. And the International Atomic Energy Agency defines a nuclear and radiation accident as an event that has led to significant consequences to people, the environment, or the facility, including lethal effects to individuals, large radioactive releases, and the reactor core melting. But some of them too have been just... I remember there was one in a plane when I was looking at the individual instances of this, and there was one in a plane where it took off. It was marked as part of the cargo, and then when they landed, they were like, "Where'd that go?" Like, so these are the people that we're entrusting to, quote unquote, save humanity or fix the weather, this kind of stuff. They're just straight up misplacing nuclear arms.
And what happens when you what happens when you blow up a nuclear weapon in space? Like, what does it do to the atmosphere?
Who knows?
I just feel like this whole thing is such a bad idea. Why are we trying to blow the Earth up, and why are we trying to blow each other up? Yeah, Jesus Christ.
It's like that Raytheon tweet that when they were saying how Raytheon creates the greenest weapons, how they create the most environmentally stable weapons.
Well, more negativity from the guys at Blendr. You're welcome.
All right, anything else you wanted to add today?
That's everything.
All right. Don't forget to head over to our website, blendrnews.com, BLENDR news.com, to sign up for our newsletter, which goes out 6 days a week. And we'll catch you next time.
All right. Bye, everybody.